In this video, I'm going to show you how to move a project from Premiere Pro to DaVinci Resolve 20. There can be some issues you might run into, but you don't need to learn how to solve them the hard way like I did. I'm going to share all I've figured out in my more than 20 years of editing experience to make the move as easy as I can for you. In this example, I'm opening up an old edit by my boss James from a few years ago when the company was still using Premiere Pro. Now, before you even think about moving your edit, some prep work can save you significant headaches later. To begin, I'm going to duplicate this timeline. And we'll name this to Resolve. And open this up. And we're going to tidy this timeline up a little bit. The simpler the timeline, the fewer possible points of failure. So we'll grab these and move them down. And here I've got all my interviews on the first track, and then my B-roll. Then we have an adjustment layer that's got a lumetri effect with a film emulation on it. And then we have some graphics. We've got a little super at the front. We have the little Autodesk logo. And we have these lower thirds. And an end graphic. And then below this first track is all of the interview audio. Then we've got some location sound and some atmosphere. And then we have the music track. This edit doesn't have any multicam elements in it, but I did want to show you what happens when we try and move that across. So here at the end, I have made a fake multicam track that's just the same angle that zooms in and out. Now these lower third graphics are actually dynamically linked from an After Effects project, and that definitely won't come across. So we're going to render and replace them. I'm going to right click, render and replace. And here I'm going to make sure, because these have an alpha channel, I'm going to work with Apple ProRes 4444. And I have a folder for graphics already set up on the hard drive, and we'll hit OK. It should just take a second. And so now you can see this has been replaced with a .mov file. We'll quickly do the same to the other two, and I'll speed through that so you don't have to watch it. If I come over to my graphics folder, you'll see it's created movie files next to the dynamic link files. Next, we're going to want to check the settings of the sequence to make sure we can match them in Resolve. So I'll right click here, go up to sequence settings. And you can see it's 23.976 for the frame rate. We have a square pixel aspect ratio. And it's a 1920 by 1080 HD timeline. The other thing I'm going to do is export a video so we have a reference that we can check against when we open this project up in Resolve. So I'm just going to go up to export. And we'll just do a H.264 master. And it's going to export next to the project file. So let's do that real quick. And I have to apologize to Stefania. That's a really unfortunate frame to be parked on. Let's move there. That's a little bit. Okay, now we're going to finally export a file out that Resolve will be able to read. File, export. We're going to use a Final Cut Pro XML. There are a couple of other options that we could use. We could use an EDL, or we could use an AAF. EDL is an old format that only transfers cuts, not transitions or speed changes or audio information or anything else. An AAF is good for audio, so if you're going to Pro Tools or something, it would be a good choice. But the video information it carries across can be pretty hit or miss, so XML is our best bet. If you do end up having major audio issues, you could try using AAF and see if that gets you a better result. But we're going to create an XML. And we'll save it in our post folder. Hit save. And we will get a little translation report that will tell us about any issues that might have been created. You'll see there's some issues with some of the fades that were added to the audio, so we'll deal with those. And you'll see there's some issues with multicam, so we're going to deal with that in a little bit as well. Right, now that we have our XML file, we're going to get our DaVinci Resolve project ready. We're going to create a new project. We'll hit the edit page, and we're going to open our project settings by either hitting Shift and 9 on the keyboard, or hitting this cog icon down here in the corner. And under Master Settings, we want to make sure that these match the Premiere Pro project. So this is a 1920 by 1080 HD timeline and a square pixel aspect ratio, so that's correct. But the timeline frame rate is wrong, so we need to change this to 23.976. And we'll hit save. Now, there are two ways to import everything you need. I'm going to show you the messy way that you definitely shouldn't use, and then I'll show you the much more organized way. So open up your media pool if you haven't already by pressing the media pool button up here. Then you can right click, select timelines, import, and this long list of formats. We're going to navigate to where the XML has been saved, which in our case is this post folder. And select import. And right here, you'll see an option, automatically import source clips into media pool. So that means it will bring in all the media that we need to rebuild this timeline. And when I hit OK, it's missing a couple of clips. So we'll deal with that in a second. It will tell us about some errors. And also, more importantly, look at this gigantic mess that we made. See, when you do it this way, it just dumps all of the footage in just one big pile. It's a complete unorganized mess. So I never work like this. I'm going to hit Command and Z to undo. Instead, I want to make sure you've clicked this little icon up here to show your bin list, which is empty right now. And we're going to bring all of the media in first. So if we navigate back to this project, I'm going to select the footage, the graphics, the music, and the sound effects. And we're going to drag it right here under the word master. You could drag it in here, but that will have the same effect as the XML import, and it will just make one big mess. But if we bring it over here and I release it, it keeps the folder structure. Everything is nice and organized the way we want it. Now, in the master folder, I'm going to right click, timelines, import, big long list. We'll select our XML. We'll press import. We're going to turn off this automatically import source clips section because we already have the media. And when I hit OK, it's going to ask where to look. And since this is just one timeline, we can just leave it selected as the master folder and it will look within everything here. OK. And so there is one error, so we'll deal with that in a second. Let's shrink all this material down so we can get a better look. So the missing file seems to be the outro graphic. I'm not really sure why I had a problem importing that because it's right here. So first thing I'm going to do is just re-import this to the timeline. We'll fix that. So first things first, there are some graphic issues aside from that end card. If I go here to the beginning, the adjustment clip that had the lumetri effect on has for some reason been replaced with one of the lower thirds, as has the piece of text at the beginning. Text graphics you make in Premiere Pro, adjustment clips, any other kind of generator, video effects, audio effects, they don't come across. I wasn't expecting them to just replace them with a random graphic from the project, but so I'll just delete these and we'll have to remake them later. There are a few problems with the audio. The first and most obvious one is that these stereo audio tracks have actually imported in as dual mono tracks. So you've got the left track and the right track on two mono tracks, and the same with the music here. This is a pretty easy fix. We'll do the music first. We're going to unlink, and I'm just going to select this second mono track and delete it. And then when I select the first one, I'm going to right click to clip attributes. And in the audio section, I'm going to change it from a mono track to a stereo track and make sure track 1 is going to the left, track 2 is going to the right, and hit OK. And that's magically turned that back into a stereo track. And then the other thing we want to do is make sure that the track that it's living on is also stereo, because right now these 1.0 mean they're all mono. So we can just right click on the track header, change track type to stereo. We'll do the same on this layer where the sound effects lived. So we'll delete the second one, select the first one, right click, clip attributes, stereo, make sure it's 1 and 2, and change this track to stereo. I'm also going to right click down here and delete empty tracks just to clean things up a little bit. Another issue is volume. If I play this back, you can see the music is way too loud, the dialogue is way too quiet. And if I flip back to Premiere Pro real quick, the reason is the volume wasn't changed by selecting it and adjusting it in the properties. It was changed by adjusting the gain, which you do by hitting G on the keyboard. And you can see dialogue has been normalized to different levels. And the music has also been turned down in the same spot. And Resolve doesn't recognize that. So if I open the inspector and select a piece of audio, as far as it's concerned, everything is just set to 0. Except you'll notice, if I select the sound effect here, that's adjusted to -4.7. And when I flip back to Premiere Pro, that's because the adjustment was indeed made here in the Properties panel instead. So again, these are the sort of changes you'll have to go through and change manually. You're also going to see some issues with the dissolves. If I zoom in a little bit, not really sure why it does this with dissolves at the beginning of a track. But for some reason, the track itself doesn't seem to show up until the dissolve is finished. You'll also notice a difference is this is a linear fade. And if I go back to Premiere Pro and zoom in on some of these, this is more of a sine wave which doesn't get translated correctly. So if you really want to fade like that, if I delete this and bring this track further out, you can drag a fade in and add a curve to it if you really want to, and do it that way. Let's take a look at these graphics files again, and you're going to notice that this bug is teeny tiny and in the middle of the screen, which is completely wrong. And if I play the lower thirds, those are completely wrong as well. That's because in Premiere Pro, you've got 2 different sizing options when a clip doesn't match the timeline. If I right-click on one of these graphics, you'll see down here, scale to frame size is turned off. And because of that, this 4K graphic needs to be scaled down to 50% to show up. Otherwise, if I set this back to 100, it's too big and it's gone off screen. If you do have scale to frame size turned on, like this graphic down here, even though it's a 4K graphic, the scale says 100% because it's actually squeezed that graphic down to fit inside the HD timeline. In Resolve, you have similar functions, but they're named a little bit differently. If I go to the project settings and go to image scaling, the default here is scale entire image to fit, which is the same as scale to frame size. So that's what it's expecting with all of these graphics. And that's why it's interpreting, rather than 50% here, it goes from 0 to 1, so it's 0.5. But because it scaled it to fit before it did this change in the zoom, it's made it too small. Whereas this graphic at the end, the zoom is set to 1, it's scaling correctly. If I select one of these clips and under retiming the scaling, I change the scaling to crop, it will show up the same way that it was showing in Premiere Pro. So your 2 options are, if only a couple of things like this have been affected, you can do it this way, where you just change this to crop. But if all of your footage is being interpreted incorrectly, you can go to project settings and change it to scale full frame with crop, and that will hopefully fix your issue. All right, did we notice anything else? One thing, the multicam clips are not there. That's because the multicam clips weren't recognized. So if you do want them to come through, what you have to do is select your clips, right click, and under multi-camera, we'll hit flatten. And now this has gone to the original clips themselves rather than the multicam clip. So you'd have to do that before you created your XML, and then you'd be able to import them in. Now I want to bring in the exported video so that we can check it against the timeline and see if we can spot any discrepancies. Navigate to Finder. Under Post, we had our MP4 file that we created. Let's bring that in. And we have 2 options. The first option, if I hold down Option while clicking and dragging this down, that will just bring the video. You can see it's too long because it was expecting the multicam clips here at the end. But what we can do is under composite mode, we can set this to difference. And the way that composite mode works, if the pixel is the same, it goes black. If there's any kind of difference, you see some of it come through. Now, you see a slight difference because the video in Premiere Pro had color effects applied to it, so there will be slight differences in color and contrast. Obviously, this graphic is incorrect. But because there are differences, but they're only really color differences, I'm actually going to do a different method. Let's delete that. I'm going to click this icon right here, so we have our source viewer as well as our timeline viewer. We're going to load this into the source. I'm going to park both that and the timeline on the first frame. And up here, I'm going to turn on gang viewers. And when I do that and play the timeline, that'll give us a good idea if there's any issues with cuts or framing or timing. So you can see here, it's not respected some of the scaling differences. So we'll have to go through and fix those manually. And also, let's play that again. This had a speed ramp in it, and it's completely ignored those because that doesn't translate correctly either. So you're going to have to rebuild speed effects from scratch as well as reframing. So you see, with some careful planning and execution, it's really not too hard to move and edit from Premiere Pro to DaVinci Resolve. It's not seamless, but hopefully these tips and tricks will make it a pretty smooth process. If you run into any issues, let me know in the comments down below and I'll try my best to help you. And while you're down there, please consider giving this video a thumbs up to help other people discover it. And be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on all the other tips and tricks I'm going to be sharing with you, like these. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.